we were talking about Mississippi State's schedule and why there was excitement, or as much excitement as there is, seemingly, about the Bulldogs leading into this season. And I floated it out there to you, Borky. Let's say that Mississippi State goes 8-4 with a 4-4 mark in conference play. What were the 4 SEC wins for Mississippi State? Love to hear from you on that as well, as we did in the 3 o'clock hour about Ole Miss. So, same scenario. Let's say Ole Miss goes 8-4 this year, including a 4-4 mark in conference play. That means non-conference wins against Mercer, Georgia Tech, Tulane, and ULM, and then 4 wins in the league. What are the 4 most likely wins, Borky, for you for Ole Miss?
Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Auburn.
I would agree.
I think in that order, too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the order on the schedule, that means an 0-2 start to league play, and then 3 straight wins to get to 3-2, and then a loss to A&M and a loss to Georgia to fall to 3-4, and then a win against Mississippi State to finish the year at 4-4. So, a win at home over Arkansas, a road win against Auburn, a home win against Vanderbilt, and a road win against Mississippi State. That's to get to 4-4. If they were to win one more, is Texas A&M at home the next most likely?
I think so.
If they were to do, by the way, if you say 8-4 for Zach Arnett, and you give that somewhere between an A and an A+ in year number 1 as the head coach, what is 8-4 for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss in terms of a letter grade?
Considering the schedule will be, I mean, having Georgia instead of Kentucky and having to go to Athens, that's not easy. My thing, or at least what I'm focused on, is not so much record. It's, well, depending on what the record is. If they finish the year 6-6 after Auburn last year, the gigantic raise, all that, well, then there's problems. Then obviously you focus on record. But if they go 8-4 and November is a disaster again, that's what I'm watching for. Is how is November handled?
November is Texas A&M at home, Georgia on the road, ULM at home, Mississippi State on the road.
And not even so much as like the football games, because you got to go to Georgia in November, and that just sucks. I mean, they can play great and still lose, and lose comfortably even with how much of a machine Georgia has become. But is there a moment like last year where you lose a game and then focus is gone? Is there a job that comes open? Does A&M move on from Jimbo? And although with the high volume of trolling that he's done of Texas A&M, I don't think that he's going to be on their list anyway. But if a job comes open, are you going to put your fans through all that crap again? Is there going to be memes made about a reporter, or are you going to handle it like a coach would, as opposed to a frat guy? Because that's kind of how it was handled last year. That is what I am almost as fascinated with that as I am with the record is, because if they are having a good year and November's still a disaster, it's still bad. If they have the identical record that they had a year ago, November is a problem. You can't praise it.
I just don't think the schedule is built in a way for November to play out the way that it played out a year ago. So you think about the Ole Miss schedule last year, right? 7-0 to start the year. They lose to LSU to fall to 7-1. They beat on A&M on the road to get to 8-1. And then they lose their last 3. And they finish the regular season 8-4, and then they lose the bowl game. Did I do that right? No. They finished 7-5. Wait. What was Ole Miss's record last year?
8-5.
8-5. Yeah.
Because they lost the bowl
7-0,
game.
7-1, 8-1, and then lost their last three. Arkansas, Alabama, State.
Arkansas,
Alabama,
Mississippi
Arkansas
State, Texas Tech.
Yeah, that was it. I don't think the schedule's built in a way. No, it's built to start 3-0. But let's say you start 3-0 and then you lose to Alabama and you're 3-1 after 4 games. And now you got 2 home games against LSU and Arkansas. Nobody's going to pick Ole Miss to beat LSU this year. Although we did get a message just a couple of minutes ago on the C Spire text line from Shed in Winona. It says, I feel good about the Rebels beating LSU at home this year. So some people will pick that. Most won't. They're not going to be favored against LSU in that game. Can you imagine the way the outlook on the season changes if Ole Miss were somehow to beat LSU in a home game on the 30th of September? All of a sudden, people get kind of, oh. Just to finish the Ole Miss exercise from a moment ago, because this is exactly what we did with Mississippi State in the first hour of the show. All right, so what were the 4 in the SEC that would give you a 4-4 mark and an 8-4 overall record? What happens if things get crazy and you win 2 that you're maybe not supposed to on paper? And Borky, if somebody was going to guess the 2 that they're not supposed to win on paper that they actually won, I think most people would guess LSU and Texas A&M. 2 home games, 1 in September, the end of September, 1 in November. I mean, that's like a crazy blew away all expectations season there. But what if it goes 2 the other way? What if you lose at home to LSU and then you lose at home the next week to Arkansas? What if you drop that one on the road against Auburn? What if you don't get it done against Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl? I just flipped 3. And that takes you from an 8-4 likely scenario to a 5-7 nightmare scenario.
I mean, that's disaster territory.
It's disaster territory.
I'm kind of in the camp
considering what the school has committed to the program.
Well, I think 6 would be disaster territory. Considering what they're investing, there's such a. Since we started this conversation earlier in the show with Mississippi State, let's pretend for a second that is what Mississippi State ends up with. Fans will be really disappointed. The roster will turn over pretty dramatically with how many veterans and seniors you have on this team. It wouldn't be good. People would be concerned.
But it's 6-6 and a trip to the Liberty Bowl in Zach Arnett's first year.
That you're paying $3 million for.
And it doesn't feel like you just fell off the side of a mountain.
No. I mean, after his predecessor passes away and he takes over as a completely inexperienced head coach, and he's very cheap, relatively speaking. $3 million a year now is cheap for college football coaches. Imagine that.
It is.
That's different when you're paying top 11 money now or whatever it is. When you had the charade that was last November, and it wasn't just the way they lost football games, it was all the other crap. And then that turns into a massive raise and millions of dollars raised for NIL. And you buy out a defensive coordinator to pay your new one over $2 million. It's not just Lane Kiffin's salary. It's Lane Kiffin's salary, which was increased by $2.5 million or whatever it is. His staff got more money. And his defensive coordinator, again, got bought out, and you bring in a new one for over $2 million. Fans raised money by the millions of their own money. It's not Keith Carter's money. That's fans' money by the millions that they raised for this team. And if you do all of that and put up with what you put up with, and you go 6-6 and go to the Liberty Bowl, it's a disaster.
Yeah. And that's not a fun scenario to walk through. We're kind of walking through all the scenarios, and that's one of them. Seems unlikely, I think.
I mean, last November was a disaster for Ole Miss, and they ended the season 8-4. I mean, so, November was bad. The season was not. Now, the schedule is more difficult, but still, it's like everything unraveled for them, and they still won 8 games. So,
yeah, this roster feels better than 6 wins.
It does.
I mean, it feels like a 7, 8, 9 win roster. But we'll see. Bo in Indianola, who always sees the bright side of things for Ole Miss, says that Ole Miss wins 2 out of 3 against Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. It'd be a pretty special season, Bo, if it played out like that.
Got another text earlier about where Alabama is on Ole Miss's schedule, and I do agree with that. Now, winning in Tuscaloosa is a very difficult thing. It's still a Nick Saban-coached Alabama team.
Yeah, sure.
But you'd prefer to play them then as opposed to later, so that's a nice break.
Yeah, week 4 is better than week 9.
No doubt.
If you're facing Alabama.